Welcome to today's webinar. My name's Josh Osborne and I'm the Product Manager for the CI Tools here at Central Innovation, and welcome to the weekly CI Tools webinar. This is a webinar that I run every week and it covers stuff to do with the CI Tools. So we look at how to use the CI Tools, whether it be from a new user's point of view or from an advanced user's point of view. Sometimes we cover off news about updates to the tools or information that you need to know about updates to the tools. Sometimes we cover off just questions that have come through frequently on our support channel, and sometimes we cover requests that we've had for things to show during these sessions. This week we are going to be looking at the CI coverings tool again. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the changes in the recent update to the tool. As you may know, we released an update recently which had some quite significant changes in the tool. I covered this in a webinar a couple of weeks ago, but I'm just going to reiterate what we went over there. And also, now that it's been out for a couple of weeks, we've found out a few more sort of questions that people want to know about it. So I'm also going to be covering some of that sort of thing as well. So that is the new coverings update that we'll be doing today. My apologies if any of you were tried to attend last week or the week before. I was on leave the week before, and last week was a public holiday here, so we have missed a couple of weeks, but we should be back on track for the next quite a while now. If you do have any questions as you go, I will be checking on the chat windows as we go along here, so please just feel free to enter any questions you have in there, and I will see those at some stage, and I'll either answer them online or I will follow up with you afterwards to answer them on a support ticket. But with that out of the way, let's get into the coverings update. Actually, I'll just quickly check and see if there's any questions, and then we will jump into the coverings update. Let me just pause that. And what have we got here? All right. Cool. So the coverings update. The new update brought through a bunch of changes. I just want to quickly go over why we made the changes, because obviously changes and different ways of doing things, you have to learn a slightly different interface and that sort of thing. You probably want to know why you have to do that. So the main reason that we've made the changes is because we've had quite a few requests recently for the coverings tool in particular to be able to be constructed using building materials. So this in particular was requested by a handful of customers who wanted to be able to get accurate quantities out of the coverings tool, specifically the volumes and that sort of thing. And there's not a particularly easy way of doing that using an object as we were doing it already. So what we've done is essentially changed the way that the actual 3D element of the CI Tools coverings are produced, so that they are made using building materials. So rather than being a bunch of, for instance, on this shingles that have a 3D representation, but are essentially just a sort of a surface showing you some shingles, these are actually 3D building materials that are sitting there, and they have a real volume to them and that sort of thing, so that you can generate a componentless schedule and you'll see actual data about what components, about what building materials and how much are being used in your coverings. So that was the main reason for the change. Because of that, we had to add a bunch of extra parameters to let you control the building materials. And so while we were doing that, we found that we didn't have enough room to put them in the way that the interface worked before. So we've reworked the interface a bit to be able to fit in those extra settings and just to sort of streamline things a bit as well, in a way that I'm fairly confident you'll find very intuitive, and if not, hopefully I can point you in the right direction for some things that maybe you were looking for today. Obviously, the main two coverings that are used are the wall and roof coverings, so that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. And the first thing I want to cover off is migration. So if you have a project that you were already working on, which is probably most of you, when you install the new coverings tool, what you will see is that there is a new object. So I'm just going to select my wall covering here, and if I go into the settings, you'll see that my wall covering settings look different now. So the first thing is you get this screen here telling you about what's happening. This is not intended to scare you off or anything. It's just to give you information about what's happened. Basically, it's letting you know that this is the old covering. You are completely free to keep using this old covering. If you want to transfer to the new covering, you can. But migration is not perfect. So if you want to keep using this, just press the Edit Settings button and you can continue completely as you were before the update came out. So if all you want to do is keep on going with what you have there and you're not interested in the building materials stuff, at least for the coverings you have placed currently, you can just ignore the new object entirely and keep using the existing object. It's referred to now as the deprecated wall covering, just so that you know which one you're working on. This doesn't mean that we're going to be deleting it tomorrow or anything like that. It just means basically this is the old object. It's a sort of a snapshot of it at this point in time, and the new object is the one that you should be using for new placement of coverings, but this one here is still available to use. So if you're migrating from a different ArchiCAD version or just from a previous coverings version in ArchiCAD 27, you can just go ahead and keep using this one just by pressing that Edit Settings button. You don't have to migrate straight away. And in fact, if you have a lot of coverings in your project, I probably wouldn't even recommend migrating straight away, because you will need to check them to make sure they have migrated properly, and that's probably going to take time that you will need to figure out what you're going to do with that. So if you are concerned at all about the fact that it will take a little bit of time to go through and check that the migration has gone through in the way that you want and to add in some new settings, then just stick with the old one for now and start placing new ones whenever you get to place some new coverings. And the way that the existing covering, the deprecated covering that is, works is exactly the same as it did before. Everything is laid out in the same places. They all do the same things. If you installed the update early on, we did have a bug where the styles were getting the colors wrong. That's been fixed as of quite a few weeks ago now. So if you got the early version and had problems there that made it very annoying, that has been addressed now. So if you go in there, those should all be the same as they were before. So that is the deprecated wall covering, and it's the same case for the roof as well. So if you go in and select one of your roof coverings, you'll see that it's using the deprecated roof covering. It has a similar informational thing here, and you can press the Edit Settings button to just go ahead and continue working as you were before with no changes. So what I am going to do though is I'm going to show you an upgrade. So for those of you who don't want to migrate to the new objects, you just want to stick with what you're working with now, you don't need to do anything more. Just press the Edit Settings button and away you go. If you do want to migrate, I'm just going to cover off a couple of things to watch for when you do the migration, because by necessity the tool simply can't guess what you would want to be using for some of the things that it should migrate to, so you will need to make some changes. So I'll start with the roof covering. So at the moment you can see I've got this roof covering applied here, and if I open the settings, it goes to the deprecated coverings. So in this case I'm going to say yes, I do actually want to migrate. So you can see the shape of my roof there. You can see the covering has two different colors of the tiles or shingles there. I can't remember which it is. And you can see the trims and that sort of thing there. So what I'm going to do is, as it recommends here, if you want to migrate or transfer rather, you can do the Command Option or Control Alt click on the new object to transfer over. So I'm going to hit, in my case, Command and Alt, and you'll see the syringe icon comes up, and I'm going to click it on the new covering. And you'll see a couple of changes right away. The first one being that the way that the preview works has changed. So now we've made the preview show you a sort of a cross section of a chunk of the roof rather than the entire roof. So this is so that you can more easily tell what the settings are actually doing that you're making changes to. If you remember from using the old one, it's so zoomed out that often when you make changes to things like sizing on flashings and the shape of downpipe and that sort of thing. You can't even see it on the preview anyway. It was essentially useless. So we've made that a bit more useful by changing it to always show you this 3D cutaway here. And you can see that it's brought through the style we were using. So it's a shingle style, and everything looks roughly like how it was set up before. So I'm just going to hit OK and see what it looks like. So you'll see it will update to the new covering, and the main thing that you will notice is that everything is black now in this case. And the reason for that is the building material. So one of the things that we simply can't guess when you migrate is what you want the new building material to be. So it will be using the style you were using before. In this case, mine's called shingles, and you can see the building material set there. But what we can do is we can now update our styles to reflect the building material that you actually want. So I'm going to hit the edit button here so I can make some changes, and I'm going to go through and do the changes that I want. So the building material is this new one here, and we can choose what we want those to be. I'm going to say roof tiles for this one, and you'll see that it applies roof tiles all over it. We've also got this surface icon here, and that will allow us to override the surface. So if you want to apply a building material, so say we want to say that these are roof tiles because that's what we want to see in our component list later, but we don't actually want it to look like the material of the roof tiles, which looks a bit funny because it has a texture of a roof tile which is sticking on 3D roof tiles. We're going to override that. So we can click this paintbrush icon here, and we can set our overrides. So there's two of these for the two alternating types. You can set them to both be the same if you don't want them to alternate. So I'm just going to go with golden beige for that one, and I'll set the second one to golden ochre just so we can see a bit of variation there. We also have a new button here next to the surfaces option, and that is to override the surface but only on the visible parts. So for the case of things like the actual cladding, this will make it that only the top surface includes the override that you want to apply here. So basically it means if you generate a surface schedule out of ArchiCAD, it will only pick up this surface that's applied on the top of these. It won't cover the bottom sides of the shingles, for instance, and that sort of thing. So you probably want to have that on in most cases. If you are interested in getting surface schedules out, it just means that you'll get the correct area value for your surfaces if you do that. So we can turn that on as well, and that will separate those out. You won't actually see it because obviously it's only applying it. We're saying only apply it to the things that we can see, so we can only see what we can see. So that looks pretty good. Let's hit save, go OK, and that will update our covering. So it looks roughly the same as it did before, slightly different surfaces there, but everything is built using building materials now, so we can generate a component list and see those. And it's the same for the other settings as well. So you'll notice that my flashing here looks different than it did before, and the reason that it looks different before is for exactly the same reason. So flashing here, it has defaulted to pick up the steel building material, which is probably right in this case. I'll leave it at steel, but I do want to have this painted, so I'm going to override that, and I'll say that we'll override it with let's go with yellow so that we can see that nice and easily. I wasn't actually using a style with this one, so we don't need to do anything more here. If you were, you can just hit edit to edit the style and then save that. I can just hit OK though, and now we are still using our steel building material, but we're painting it yellow on top. So we've got that same thing going on. We can generate a component list and a surface schedule, and we'll get the two different area and volume values for those, if that's what you're looking for. Obviously, some of you may also have favorites for your coverings, and so the process for those will be the same as it is for these. You can just do the transfer across and then go through and make sure that your building materials and overrides match to what you want, and then resave those favorites. So that's no, it's not a wall covering, that's a roof covering. Let's have a look at the wall covering as well though, and the process is essentially the same. So we'll select the wall, go into the settings, we get the same reminder about it being deprecated here because I didn't press OK after hitting edit settings before, so it's still showing me this. Once you do press edit settings, if you make any changes after that, it won't show you this screen anymore. but we're going to migrate this one. So again, I'm going to hold down Command Option rather. I get the syringe icon, I click on the new covering, and then I hit OK, and it'll do that migration. So you can see that it remembers that it's still weatherboards, it's still doing the thing that it should do, we've got holes cut out and all that sort of jazz, but it looks different, it's not grey anymore, and that's again because of the building material. So if we go into our settings, we can see what's going on there. Okay, so we weren't using a preset in this case, a style in this case. We were just using settings here. So weatherboard is still the same, sizing and angle and stuff, that's all still the same, but the default building material that is chosen is plywood. I think we will change to timber wall for this one. It looks like that's defaulting to have a white paint on it, which I don't really want in this case. So I'm also going to override that. I'll set the paint, the color to, sure, let's go with sand beige there. And I'll also turn on the visible surfaces override there as well, because we'll have the same situation. If I generate a surface schedule, I don't want to see the surface area of the back side of my weatherboards, so I'm going to turn on that option to only cover the visible parts. And if we go through, I'm not sure if I have any trims on this covering. I don't have any trims on this covering, but it'll be the same for those as well. So if we had a wall top trim, you can see it's defaulting to timber general, and you can change that building material to something else and also override it and set a visibility override for it as well. And the same through all of the other settings as you probably would expect. So if I hit OK there, you'll see it will change back to roughly what we had before. It looks like we had a grey on there before, and now we have a kind of a beige color, but otherwise it has done the same thing. But yeah, the same I guess caveats apply to this one when you are migrating or transferring, or whatever you call it. So just make sure you go through, check that the building material is something that you would actually want it to be, set an override if you want to have one, and the visibility override if you want to have that. If you're using a style, just hit the edit button. So if we go in here, just hit the edit button, make the changes that you want, and then save it. And if you're using a favorite, migrate to the new object, make the changes that you want, and then save the favorite again, either as a new favorite, which is probably a good idea actually, save it as a new favorite rather than overriding the existing one, so that you can still use that for existing wall coverings that you don't want to migrate, and that will essentially allow you to create a parallel library of new favorites which you can slowly start moving across to. So yeah, so that is migrating to the coverings tool. I'm just going to quickly check for questions, and then we'll go back and cover off a few other things that I wanted to look at. All right. All right, no questions so far. So what I'm going to look at next is just a couple of things to bear in mind, or to make sure you have a look at, which are just slight differences in the new version, which you may not have noticed yet. So one of those is that in the old object, if we hit edit settings, so we can modify that here, under display options, we have some control over the way that display options work here. Obviously they are all set to use model view options at the moment, but you can control them here, and the same for the roof covering. If I select an old roof covering, here's some old ones here, and go through to display options, you get this control here telling you, allowing you to set the way that it is displayed, and also have it different on the home story, stories above and stories below. So you can set all of those settings here. Those settings for the new object are now shifted into the model view options. So if I go into my my design menu, model view options, you can see here we've got model and plan view available, and we have different settings for the way that works. So for the plan view settings at the moment, we're setting it to use the model settings, which tells us that it's that's a deprecated setting at the moment. So We're going to turn that off, and we're going to use model view options from now on, and we get essentially the same controls as before. So we've got the home, the below and above settings, and you can just toggle which things you want to show in each part. So it allows you to do essentially the same thing, but because it's in the model view options, it means that they can be different per view. It also allows us to change the how detailed the model, in this case, the plan representation of the roof is. Because of the change to building materials, everything has an actual volume to it now, so it will take a little bit longer to generate your 3D view and that sort of thing. So if that's something you're concerned about, you can use the lower polygon count, and in the plan view it will take just a very, very small amount longer, but it may be noticeable in some cases to generate, and so if that's becoming a problem, you can turn this on to lower polygon count rather than more accurate there. And because obviously this is saved in the view, you can work with it normally in low polygon mode, but then have the actual views that go on your documentation set to the more accurate option. And there's roughly similar settings for the wall symbol. So if you want them to be a generic view or a projection, and how you want the openings to show, that's available there. And then the model settings have some similar things as well. So for the roof model, you can choose how detailed you want curved surfaces to be, because again, it will, especially with things like corrugation in Spanish tiles, and to a lesser extent rolled flashings, curves are a bit more complex to show in 3D than flat things, and so this is a setting that will control essentially how accurately represented those curves are. The more accurate, the longer it will take to generate 3D. So again, you can work normally in low polygon mode and then set your actual views that are going out to documentation to be the more accurate option. And again, we have controls over how it should display. Obviously there's no story control here because we're in 3D at this point, so you can just choose what you want to see. If you don't want to see the framing in your 3D model, you can turn it off there, but then in the view that you use for your sections, you can have it turned back on so that you can see your framing. And similar with the wall, you can choose the shadow casting settings there, and also how detailed you want it to look. Again, we can have simple if you want to have nice fast views for when you're doing work, but then when you have documentation that you want to get out, you can have this switched to detailed. And so a lot of those settings now live in the model view options there. A couple of other things that I wanted to talk about in the new coverings. This button here, which you probably, if you have started using this, you will have seen it in a couple of places. It's not a setting that we've had to use anywhere in the tools before, so we had to kind of invent an icon to try and convey what we wanted to say. But essentially this button will, and when the tooltip pops up you'll see exactly what it is, but essentially what we're saying is we want this override to apply uniformly across all of the type of thing I'm looking at now. So if I set this on, so uniform mode is on, this flashing is set to the barge flashing is set to lead oxide yellow. So if I change to ridge flashing, because the uniform option is turned on, it is also lead oxide yellow. If I click this button, you'll see that they all change to different shapes. And so what we're saying now is that everything can be different. So if I go back to barge flashing, I can set that to be ultramarine violet now, which you'll see on the preview there. And if I change back to the ridge, you'll see it's still yellow. And so we can go through and we can set those all to be different, and I'll remember them all separately. So that's what this button is here. If it is 3 different icons, a triangle, a circle, and a square, that means everything's different. And if it's 3 circles, it means everything's the same. So you can see after I've changed that, everything is now the same again. And you'll see that in a few different places in the tools. So framing doesn't make sense to have that there. But if we go to Safeets, for instance, these are all set to be independent. But again, I can click the button to enforce them to all be the same. So that's what that button there does. We used to have a similar setting in the old object that just was a tick box that said that they should be uniform. This is essentially doing the same thing. I think there was one other thing that I wanted to talk about with the new update, but I've forgotten what it was. Um, nope, I've forgotten entirely, sorry. But yeah, those are the main things anyway that we've been getting questions about is how do you control the amount of detail that's shown for the coverings. So that's in the model view options under coverings in here. And also what is that new button there, and that is the control for uniform settings here. So you can go through and change those, and because this is a migrated one, you can see that the default building material is not something useful, and of course we've got this turned off anyway, so it won't do anything. But if we turn that on, we can do the same, and you'll see floor carpet is used here now. We can turn that off and set them all to be different now, and that will be different. So it's the same setting in both places. But yeah, that is the coverings tool. Essentially the main thing that I wanted to let everyone know is once you do install the update and you go into one of your place coverings and it says that it's deprecated and you get this screen here, just don't panic. All it's doing is it's telling you this is the old object. You can keep using it though, just press this button here. Just go ahead and do that if that's what you want to do right now. If you do get to a point later on where maybe you are interested in getting the building materials included in your coverings, maybe you just want to take advantage of some of the new features that were added in the new object, or you just like the new user interface, you can go about migrating those if you want to by just doing your transfer here. Make sure that your building materials and surface overrides are set up the way that you would want. Setting those in a style will make that be much quicker, but you can always just do them as you migrate them, and then you will be essentially back to looking the way that you were before, but with extra control. If you have any questions about the migration or have any problems specifically with migrating things or just with the new objects, please do let us know by logging a support ticket though. I'm just going to quickly check for questions and then we'll finish up. So if you do have any questions before we finish, put those in now. Right. All right, looks like no questions for now. But yes, please feel free to send any questions that you do have through to our support desk, nz.support@centralinnovation.com. Also, if you have a suggestion for a future webinar topic, send that through as well. That would be great. That gives me the advantage of not having to think up something to cover next week. So if there's anything that you want to know about how to use in the tools, maybe there's a tool that you've heard about that you want to see how it works or something, let me know about that. I know I can go ahead and demonstrate that in next week's session. But otherwise, thanks for coming everyone, and I hope to catch you at the next one. Thanks.